Okay, everyone, welcome, and a good gebencht year, a good blessed year to all. We are about to begin our Moshiach Matters class number 133. We are holding over here Parshas Toldos, and we're learning about Esav and Yaakov and their first encounter between the two. So it says in the pasuk last week we learned, this is on verse 29, pasuk Chav Tes in chapter 25 in Genesis and Bereshis, Parak Chav Hey. It says, "Vayazed Yaakov nozid," and Yaakov cooked a dish. Vayave Esav min Asada, and Esav came from the field, Vu Oyev, and he was tired. Esav says to Yaakov, "Pour it into my mouth. Halitenu namino." Basically stuff my face with this red stuff. I'm exhausted. Excuse me, that's why he called him Edom. Fine. So we learned last week, I discussed the Midrash, which the Midrash says that when Esav asked Yaakov, what's the essence, or what's the business, why are you cooking lentils? What are you doing? You're usually not in the kitchen, what are you doing? So Yaakov revealed to him that their grandfather passed away, and that he is therefore cooking the first meal that the mourner, his father Yitzchak, eats. Of the first meal of a mourner usually is something round, you give an egg, or in this case it was lentils, and that's what he's doing. When Esav heard that, Esav said, also in the old man, gets punished. If even an old man like meaning a tzaddik, a righteous person like my grandfather gets punished, that's a sign that there is no judge, and there is no judgment. And as a result of that, he completely rejected. Just let me shut this. He rejected the Bachor, the firstborn, because he didn't believe in Tchias HaMesim, in the resurrection of the dead. He said, there is no judge, and there's no afterlife, and there's no future life again in this world. There's only one chance to live, and let me therefore not waste my time on these spiritual matters of being the firstborn and having to serve God, because that was the job of the firstborn. I'm just going to live a life of here and now. And that's really the difference, and that has always become the difference between the Jewish people and the world of Esav, is that the Jewish people were willing to endure and live a life of poverty, and a life of suffering, and a life of commitment to an ideal, to something higher, to a service of something above themselves. And I'm talking about not just faith, where you believe and you accept and so on and so forth, but we're talking about rigorous work of dedicating and devoting yourself on all aspects of one's life, in which, as we know, 613 commandments demand a very, 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 very complete devotion to God. And that's because one realizes that there is more to life than the here and the now. That's Yaakov's reality. And he's willing to forego on the instant gratification that this world has to provide for something deeper and higher. Esav, on the other hand, is fixed on what he sees, what he can touch and smell, what's here right now. And for that, for a plate of lentil soup, he's willing to give up his entire firstborn right of being the firstborn, and therefore being the heir to the priesthood. So, as we're going to see now, Yaakov, as a result of this, purchases from him through the lentil soup, and that's a deal. Of course, every time the wicked act in a wicked way, in which they succumb to the seduction of the world and to the temptations, a little while later, not too much longer, they regret it, because it doesn't really promise much. It's an instant pleasure and a delight, but then as long as your taste buds are tingling, but then it's over, and what are you left with? You're left with a big empty pit. And that's what Esau felt right afterwards. He felt cheated. He felt it was, but that's what he decided to do. In any case, it says over here, the Medrash derives that Esau at this point denied two things. He denied Tchias HaMesim, which is he denied judgment, that there is a judge, that there will one day be a reckoning on all of man's deeds and actions. And the second thing he denied was in the future world of the resurrection. So where do we see that Esav denied the resurrection? Where is there any hint to it in this pasuk? If the Midrash says so, there has to be some kind of an indication to this in the verse. So here's an interesting idea by the Sefer Rimzei Torah. I'm not sure exactly, I mentioned to you last time, I'm not sure who they are, who's the Rimzei Torah. But he says an interesting thing. The Talmud tells us, in Medrash, not in Talmud, in Medrash, it says that Adrianus, I don't know how do they refer to him? Adrian, I think, who was the Caesar, the Roman Caesar, asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, when God is going to resurrect the body, which you Jews believe in, where is that resurrection going to take effect? As there's nothing left. Resurrecting the body means that you're bringing back the previous body to life. But there has to be something left over. If there is nothing left over, there's no one there, so what kind of resurrection is it? And the Talmud answers, and the Midrash answers, that from a certain bone that's in the back of the neck, it's called the luz bone. The luz of the shedra of the spine. And it says that this never disintegrates. This always remains intact. That means even when the body decays, this luz bone cannot be destroyed. And that's where the resurrection will be. That's the part that all those that will get up at Ches HaMesim will be resurrected from that bone. So the question now, so he says an interesting thing. Based on that, if you take a look at Esav's words in this pasuk, you have a little remez, a little hint on the words. It's actually not in this verse, but in the next verse, it says, not in the next verse, in a few verses down, in verse 32, pasuk Lamed Beis, it's Vayomer Esav, and Esav says, Hinei anoichi hoylech lamos, I'm going to die. V'lama zali b'chora, and why do I need the b'chora? So if you take these words, lamos to die, and why v'lama zeh, and why do I need this? And the first letters of this word, of this sentence, of these three words, lamos v'lama zeh, spells out the word luz, which luz is the bone from where the Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection, takes place. The fact that he said, I am going to die, and why do I need this? Meaning, and I don't believe in another life. And over here is mentioned luz, is a sign that he denied the luz experience, which is the resurrection. That's where the sages took it. This is where it can be found, actually hinted to in a code, hinted to in the first letters. We know there's a system of reading things called Rashi Tevis, and here is where it was hinted to that this is where everybody denied. Now, back on the Midrash over here itself, I discussed this in last class. We're just going to add another thought, nice thought. This is from the Arugas Abaysim. Arugas Abaysim is Rabbi Greenwald, who was Rabbi Moshe Greenwald, great rabbi in Hungary, rabbi of the city of Chust. He's my wife's great grandfather. So he asked a question. It says from the verse, it implies that because Yaakov cooked the dish, Vayazed Yaakov Nazid, because Yaakov blew the dish, that's why Esav denied everything and was willing. In other words, the news that Avram died was in the newspapers. Everybody knew about it. And we would assume that Esav also heard about it. But that did not cause him to deny God and to deny the future world. What seemed to provoke him into this blasphemy, into this complete into this rejection, the verse seems to imply that it's related to Vayazid Yaakov Nozid, that Yaakov cooked the dish. What's the relationship? Whether Yaakov is cooking lentils, whether he's not cooking lentils. I mean, based on what I said earlier, he has no reason to deny God unless God is interfering with his physical enjoyments. As we spoke in last class, most people that deny a creator, it's not from some deep philosophical convictions. It's more of an excuse. It's an answer why one doesn't have to deal with the pangs of guilt and conscience that we all have, is that we don't have to deal with that because if I deny. So in other words, when it interferes with my belly. So in this case, when Yaakov told him, it's either I give you the soup but you have to hand over your spiritual life to me. He couldn't restrain himself because it was more important to him to have that plate of soup. So that's on the simple level, but a little deeper. What's this idea that Vayazid Yaakov Nazid, that it was the dish that provoked Esav into this heresy? And the answer to that is as follows. Another question he asks is that why, by hearing that Avram died, does he get so surprised? I asked this question last week as well. I mean, okay, he knew that Avram is an old man and he's going to die. I mean, old people were dying. Why would he think that Yaakov was not going to die? So the answer to that is answered in by one idea. And that is, why was Yaakov cooking this dish, these lentils? So Rashi says two reasons. Rashi says one is that we give a mourner something round to show him that it's a form of comfort. That's the cycle of life. People come and people go. So when one realizes that, I have a tremendous loss, but that's the story of life where God created it that way, that we don't live forever. So there's a certain comfort of understanding that that's the way of the world. It's not like just a catastrophe that just happened to me, God forbid, but it's something that has been around from the dawn of mankind, and so it will be till the end of days, and therefore there's and that's why we give a person something round. There's another thing Rashi explains. It says particularly lentils. Lentils don't have a mouth. Now what that means, it doesn't have a mouth, I don't know. I would have to first of all look at a lentil and see why it is described that lentils don't have a mouth. I think I know what lentils are. I've eaten lentil soup, but I can't really understand what exactly is unique about the lentils that it doesn't have a mouth. It doesn't have an opening. Okay, maybe that's probably what it means. A mouth is usually an opening. But why are we serving this to a mourner? And the answer is, Rashi says, the reason we serve it to the mourner is because the mourner doesn't even have a mouth. He's also mute. In what sense? When you go visit, God forbid, when we go visit in Avel, someone who's sitting Shiva, who's mourning, they're not allowed to open a conversation. The people who come have to open the conversation. They're not supposed to begin the talk. And so that's the meaning, that their mouth is closed. And that's the idea. But there's a deeper meaning to this closed mouth. Closed mouth is that one should not ask questions on God. Obviously, when a person loses a loved one is in a lot of emotional pain. And that can obviously lead a person to questions. And we struggle with that. And of course, that's all part of a person of faith, believes that there is a higher purpose, and everybody lives the life they're meant to live. And the years that are given to a person as a gift from above, the amount that they need to impact this world, and when time's up, they got to leave. So one should not complain, and one should have trust that God, that's why we know that when a person passes away, when we hear the news, we say, blessed is the true judge. That's the response, the Jewish response. We always acknowledge that God is right. Now, that idea that one should not question and not have complaints against God is seen in this idea that we give him the lentils which don't have a mouth, which means it's time for silence. As the Talmud tells us that, as the Pasuk tells us, the verse tells us, when Aaron, the high priest, lost his two beloved children, he was silent. And we know it was a very, very big thing, that even though he experienced such a horrific tragedy, on such an important day, the day of the inauguration of the tabernacle, when he became the high priest, such a moment of joy, unbelievable joy, and it was ruined by such a horrific tragedy. Half of his family was taken away from him. But Aaron was silent, and that's considered a huge merit. No one should have to, chas v'shalom, deal with the situation. But really the thing is like this. If a person lives their full life, and a person dies in a ripe old age, there is really no reason to have complaints. Quite on the contrary, we're thankful. We're thankful, and the mourners feel thankful that they lived to a ripe old age, especially if they didn't suffer and they passed away peacefully. So one kind of, is not so hard to say, blessed is the true judge. But when, God forbid, someone's life is cut off at a young age, that's when we have a lot of problems. That's when it really hurts. And that's when The challenge of being silent is huge. Because a young person, in general, it's a person passing away before their time. And especially according to what the Talmud says, that there is a possibility for a person to pass away before their time. Based on certain calculations, not everybody lives out their full time. Now as Tishrei, we bless everybody. You should live full lifespans. Not only that, we should already enter into, without an interruption, into eternal life. That's going to be when Moshiach comes. But the system until that time is that it's possible that a person, it's a question in the Talmud, if it's possible for a deduction to happen to a person's life. But according to the opinion that it is possible, so then there can be complaints for whatever reason. Someone can complain that it wasn't fair or whatever. Now, when Avram died, he died at a ripe old age. He died at 175 years old, so he lived his life. But from this, therefore there was no reason for Isaac, Yaakov's, Avram's son, one and only son, to have any complaint against God, that he should be needed to be given this reminder of the lentils that don't have a mouth, that he should keep his mouth closed, meaning that he shouldn't ask any questions against God. Yitzchak doesn't need it. But from this, that Esau saw Yaakov cooking these lentils, which means that even Yitzchak needs to be reminded not to question God, not to ask questions. If that's the case, he deduced from here that Avram died before his time. That even someone like Tzaddik, a Tzaddik like his grandfather Avram Avinu, did not live out his years. And obviously, that is huge. I mean, if anybody deserved to live out their years and not die, if we're saying that the reason why a person would die early or for whatever reason is because some kind of a lacking or some kind of a deficiency, then how can we say that on Avram? No one stands a chance. If Avram doesn't stand, if Avram isn't righteous, who is righteous? So that's where he said, when he saw that there was a mourning happening, one that leaves room for, God forbid, for questions and complaints, from this that he saw the lentils being cooked, this he realized brings up the question, is there no judge? Because Avram as a tzaddik, he should not have been taken away before his time. The truth is, Avram was taken away before his time. He was taken away before his time not because of any of his faults, but because God was sparing him the anguish of watching his grandson, Esau, go out and be a murderer and be a rapist and everything else that he was. And we didn't want that Avram should have to witness this criminal behavior of his grandson. So God out of compassion to Avram, that he shouldn't, God forbid, suffer from seeing such a descendant. So in other words, Esau was really the fault that Avram died young. But again, what does Esau do? He's blaming it on Avram's deficiency, and he can't accept that, because of course he can't accept Avram's lacking anything, so he questions God. And therefore he comes to the conclusion there is no judge and there is no judgment. Fine. But where do we see from here that he also denied the resurrection? No judge and no judgment, meaning, okay, so there's no punishment after death or whatever, life on earth is random. But what do you see also that he denied the resurrection? I mean, obviously you say if there's no judge, then why would there be a resurrection? But it seems like there's specific denial on that for something that he saw. So, and the answer to that is as follows. The Gemara says in Masechtas Sanhedrin, Perek Chelek, the Gemara says that a heretic asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. His question was, how do you know, two questions. How do we know that God knows future events? That God has future knowledge, number one. And how do we know, you Jews believe that Hashem knows beforehand what's going to happen later. And you also believe in the resurrection. How do you know these two things? I mean, were you guys making this up? I don't see, where does it say this in the Torah? He wanted proof from the Bible. He wanted proof from the Chumash. Where do you see that? Yeshua ben Levi said, there's a verse. It says, Hincha Meis, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, in the parsha we're going to read. Actually, I think it's this week's parsha. I think it's in this week's parsha, Parshas Vayelech. Yeah, this week's parsha. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hincha Meis, you're going to die. v'kam ha'am hazeh, and this nation is going to get up and they're going to rebel against me. So from this verse he said as follows, that he proved to him both things. Number one, from the very fact that it says that you will die and this nation will go off the path. They will abandon me and they will rebel against me. That means that God knows the future. How does he know that the nation maybe they will behave? So from this we know that God knows the future. Secondly, he reads the verse like this: "In chameis v'kam," you are dying and you will get up. In other words, the word v'kam means and you will in chameis, and it will get up. The question is, who will get up? So if you read it further, it's v'kama amazeh, the nation will get up and rebel against God. Or it's referring to the previous word, hin chameis v'kam, you will die and you will get up. Telling you that Moshe Rabbeinu was going to get up again, and from here we know the resurrection. That's what the Gemara says. So the heretic says to Reb Shua ben Levi, you're reading the verse, you're reading it wrong. Who told you that? How do you take the word out of context? V'kam is referring to Moshe. Maybe it's v'kam ha'amazeh. The people will get up and they'll rebel against God. How do we see that? You're reading it out of context. You're messing around with the verse. You're being misleading. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi answered him, okay, but you know what? At least I proved one. At least you see one of your questions is in other words, if you say that the word v'kam is referring to the future, it means that the people will get up and rebel against God. So you see, God knows the future. So at least I've answered one of your questions. And that's what the Talmud says. So it's a strange thing, because why would Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi not answer the second question? I'm sure he can find an answer. He leaves him, he admits to him that, okay, you know what? There's no proof for resurrection, but at least I showed you that God knows the future. So he left him hanging with the second thing. And why would Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi not continue to prove it to him? The sages were like unbelievable. They knew everything. So he could have proven it to him. Why did he leave him with that? So you have to say that with his answer, he really answered both questions. So how does it work? So he gives a very brilliant answer, the Arugas Abaysim again, the Ramosha Greenwald, a genius answer. He says that really, when the Talmud asks the question, because the Gemara asks the question, from where do we know that the resurrection is going to happen, that the dead are going to come back alive? And where do we know it's from the pasuk, from the verse? And we mentioned in the earlier class, there's a whole bunch of proofs from where we derive this, various different places. One of the proofs that the Gemara says, the Talmud says, is that we don't need to have scripture, we don't need to have it told to us by God, but it's just logic. What's the logic? The logic is that if beings that haven't yet lived are being created to live, those who lived already for sure can live. In other words, what's more difficult? What is harder? To make someone who was completely non-existent exist, or to bring back someone who existed already? Obviously, to bring about a non-existent entity into existence, it's more yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, is a greater feat than bringing back someone who lived already. So therefore the Talmud says, so that's a kal v'chomer, meaning that from this that we see that new people come to the world all the time that never lived and they're given life. So for sure people who lived already could be given life. It almost seems that the Talmud in this case is not proving from here that it will happen, but rather to the notion of the question of, can God really do that? Something so ridiculous that people died will come alive. That's like impossible. How they died already. And the answer is, if people that didn't live can be made to live, people who lived already have already a closer association with life, and therefore we can be brought back. Okay, that's what the Talmud says. But he says, truth, this kal v'chomer, this, and by the way, he brings this whole idea from Reb Chaim of Tzanz, the Divrei Chaim, great Chassidic master in Galicia, in Poland. Anyway, so he says, but really this kal v'chomer is refutable. We can refute the kal v'chomer, meaning this deduction, this logic can be refuted. Why is it refuted? We can say like this. those who didn't live are given life because God is hoping that they will live a righteous life. So God is giving everybody a chance. But those who lived already and they messed up, so they don't deserve life. So God forbid. So they shouldn't be made again. What's the proof? You're saying if those who didn't live yet are coming to life, those who lived already for sure should live. But we can say that those who didn't live yet are being given life because they're giving a chance to be perfect, to live the most righteous life. But then they live, and as it says in the verse, "Ein tzaddik ba'aretz," there's no tzaddik in the world that never ever is lacking. Everybody's lacking something. So then they get a chance to finish, and everybody futches, and no one gets to live again. God forbid. Right? So one can refute this argument. However, all of that is only, this argument is only refutable. It's a really good refutation. Because the question wasn't, how do we know that God could make someone live? It's, where do we know that he will do it? Why should he do it? First time he gives a person on credit, because he believes he will live. But this only works if God doesn't know the future. Then you can say that that he's taking a gamble. He's creating people, hoping they will be righteous and live a saintly life. And that's why he gives them life kind of on credit, hoping that they'll live a good life. But then later he finds out that no, fine. So he takes life from them, and like Adam, you don't deserve to live anymore, fine. And then they never come back again. So then, but if we say that God knows the future, so initially when he creates human beings, he knows what they will do, and yet he creates them. So you can't say that the reason why people are given a first chance to live is because God believes they'll be perfectly righteous, because he knows they won't be perfectly righteous, and yet he creates them. So once we see that God is creating even non-perfectly righteous people, even people that are sinners or people that are doing, God still gives them life. So if those who never lived were given life, those who lived already, for sure should be given life. So then we have a good logic. Then we have, you can't say that God gave them life because he believed one certainty they're going to make all the right choices, because he knows beforehand. Based on this, we can actually understand how Reb Shua ben Levi is answering this heretic. Because again, he asked him two questions. How do you know that God knows the future? And how do you know the resurrection? And he tried to prove him both from one verse. But then he said, no, maybe the verse is not implying that they will come back to life again. Maybe the verse is only implying that the people will sin. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, yeah, but at least agree with me that God knows the future. Once we can establish that God knows the future, and we know that from that verse that God knows the future, then we can also establish, we don't need a verse to tell you that there will be the resurrection. Because then we can establish it from the idea that those who didn't live were given life. Those who lived already, for sure should be given life. Okay? So therefore, it's already automatically answered. Because, well, again, from his one answer, once he established that God knows the future, it's already included in that already the answer to the other question, why we will live, because we don't need a proof. We have that logic. Okay. That's what he explains. Based on that, Rabbi Greenwald, the Arugas Abaysim says, based on that, let's analyze now. Now we'll see why Esav got. We can see that Esav refuted the whole idea of Tchias HaMeis. And he said like this. Let's get a little deeper into that logic. Those who didn't live will live, are given life. And that's a proof that those who lived already, why? What's really the logic over here? Just because they lived already, they should live again? Maybe God gives everybody one chance to live. I mean, what's this idea? And the answer is just a simple thing. The answer is like this. When a person has never been born yet into this world, the person has no merit, no virtue to exist. There's nothing there. The person didn't do anything to deserve being born, to deserve being created. No one deserved to be created, because before one was created, you didn't exist. You couldn't deserve. So when God creates anybody, like it was Rosh Hashanah now, when we speak about the first year when God created the world, he created it out of his benevolence and his kindness, because he's a kind being. So initially when God gives life to people, he's basically giving them life on credit, because he's already hoping for the pleasure he's going to get from the good choices they make. So it's almost, so the idea is that he's giving life on credit, not on deservance. So now we'll understand the logic. Logic is like this. If people can come alive just based on credit, without any payment, without any deservance, those who have already lived life and earned, lived a good life. You know? Okay. We said, okay, not everybody's a perfect tzaddik, but we do a lot of good things. So as a result of all the good things people do, they earn life. So now that you earned it already, of course, you'll be given life again based on deserving the life because of the good deeds that once did. So that's the logic. The logic is someone who has no deservance at all is given life on credit, someone doesn't need credit because he can pay for life, so to speak, because of the good deeds that he's done, for sure should live. If this is the remedy, so this is the whole power of Tchias HaMesim. Again, let's understand that this is not, what I'm teaching you today is a little drush. Drush means it's a way of expounding on Torah in a more midrashic kind of discussion. So the explanation of, so that now, but here's the thing. All of this will work if what? If we can say that there are people who are born and live a righteous life, and as a result of that will deserve to live again. But when he saw that even as grandfather Avram died early, and how did we establish that he died early? From this, that Yaakov made the lentils, which were round, which was a reminder to his father Isaac, Yitzchak, not to ask any questions. And again, why would we ask a question? Only if someone dies prematurely. So he realized that even Avram Avinu didn't make it. So then his argument is very, very, very simple, and no one is going to be resurrected. If Avram's life is cut down, obviously because there's a lack of merit, deserving life, how can anybody else make it? So therefore he denied completely this whole idea of his ever chance of having Tchias HaMesim. Since the whole concept of Tchias HaMesim, according to this idea, is based on this understanding that those who don't have credit, those that are living off credit, are living, those who have merit, but no one has merit if Avram doesn't have merit. That was his question. All right, that's his explanation. I want to conclude today with a more spiritual explanation on this verse. It says that Yaakov came, a little Chassidus, a little Kabbalistic insight. It says that Yaakov comes from the field. Yaakov cooks the dish. Esav is coming from the field and he's exhausted. Esav is associated with the field. Kabbalistically, the field is referring to the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is called Chakal Tapuchen Kadishin, the holy apple orchard. Sometimes it's compared to a field. Esav is coming from the field, and the Talmuds, and we learned from the Midrash in the last class, we learned Esav committed 5 crimes on that day. Last week we mentioned the 5 crimes. He murdered someone. He had relations with a betrothed girl. He sold the firstborn, by that cheaping it. He denied God, and he denied the resurrection. Those are the 5 sins. So the Tzemach Tzedek, third Chabad Rebbe, great master Kabbalist, and deep and high Chassidic master, explains this pasuk on a very, very high spiritual note. As we understand these biblical figures, to be far more than just earthly creatures down here, but that they represent powerful spiritual forces in the higher realms. Esav, what's the story with Esav? Esav is called Ish. He's called a man. And we know that there is a man and a woman in the realms of the holy, and there is a man and a woman in the realms of the unholy. In the holy and in the unholy, there's both a man and a woman. In holiness, the man is called the 6 emotional attributes. The Ze'er Anpin is called Ish, the 6 emotions of God, and the woman is the Shekhinah. And the job of the man, which are the emotions, is to, we always know there is a marriage, there is a yichud, there is a unity between the Shekhinah and the Ze'er Anpin, and the Ze'er Anpin is bringing down in this intimacy great godly light and infusion into the Shekhinah, which brings the Shekhinah as the soul of creation, which brings tremendous holy enrichment to the creation. And we know that through all the mitzvahs that we do and all the good deeds that we do, we continuously feed that union. We continuously enhance and cause or trigger that union. And the more we unify HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah, which means we bring down the transcendental infinite light into the Shekhinah, the godlier and godlier and godlier the world becomes, until this finite world can facilitate the infinite, and that's the coming of Moshiach. But as this union takes place between the man of holiness with his bride, the man of the unholy, the Ish of Klippa, the man of the unholy, which is the powers of the masculine powers of the Klippa, are also trying to influence the Shekhinah, because they want to pollute the Shekhinah. And by trying to do what? By trying to, God forbid, a horrible thing, rape the Shekhinah. And that's the idea of a betrothed woman being raped. The Pasuk describes in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, the Pasuk speaks about when a man finds a girl and she's betrothed and he lies with her in the field, it says the man should be punished and be killed, but to the girl you shouldn't do anything because she's not at fault. She was crying out, but helplessly the man overpowered her, and he did it because it was in the field and she had no one to call to. That is what the verse says. Obviously it says very deep meaning. The field and the girl that's in the field is referring to the Shekhinah. The man, Ish Sadeh, the man who rapes her, is Esav. Esav in his physical form down here, who is an embodiment of the spiritual Klippa masculine powers. And the point of his raping of the Shekhinah, God forbid, is that he wants to infuse just like when a man has relations with his wife, the man is drawing from his brain. That's where the seminal drop comes from. It comes from the person's mind, from the person's brain. So what he's really doing, he's taking of his brain, which in his brain is his essence, and he's transmitting it to his wife, and that's how later they have a baby, they have a child who's a full-fledged human being with a brain and with the entire soul, because the soul that's in the brain. So when we say that the Ze'er Anpin, the holy man, has relations with the Shekhinah, it means that he's transmitting tremendous from his brain. What's the brain? He's giving chachma to the Shekhinah. He's enlightening the Shekhinah. He's giving the Shekhinah a higher consciousness, a higher knowledge of God. In other words, as a result of this union, the entire realm of holiness is fed tremendous insight into the truths of the divine, into the truth of God, and it trickles down. It passes through all the enlightened worlds of the angels and the souls that are in Gan Eden, and it also then later comes down to the tzaddikim down here, that the righteous individuals are filled with new insight, and Torah wisdom, and that Torah wisdom is then passed on to everybody, and the world is filled with godly knowledge. That's the idea of a higher union. The Klippa wanting to have relations with the Shekhinah means that she's contaminating the Shekhinah also with Chachma, but the Chachma from the other side. He refers to it as Kohen Midyan, the priest of Midyan. This is the great Yisroel, was the priest of Midyan, which means he has all the ideas, all the philosophies that are not kosher, all the ideologies that are not kosher. And you wonder, like, where does these trends of thinking come to the world, which sometimes are very antithetical to holiness, whether it's scientific data or things that are manipulated and to sound like they are contradicting Torah and the like, and different ideas. The world is suddenly filled with these new ideas, whether it's religions, whether it's faith, whether it's other ideologies that are passed. These don't begin down here. They begin so to speak, in the idea that the unholy man has relations with the Shekhinah. When you put it into the source, it pollutes, whatever that means up there in the heavens above. It creates a certain confusion, and that confusion has ripple effects through the cosmos. This is the idea of what it says, that the snake had relations with Chava. Chava is the Shekhinah, and the Talmud says that the snake in Gan Eden didn't just make her eat from the tree of knowledge, but he actually, when he saw Adam when he saw Adam being intimate with Chava, it says that they were not covered, because there was still a time when they had no self-awareness, because they didn't sin yet, they didn't have self-consciousness, so they had their intimacy. The snake came around and he coveted Chava, and then later he had relations with Chava. He raped her. So what does that mean spiritually? Obviously, it has a very deep meaning. It doesn't mean physically. It has a deep meaning. It means that the snake, which represents the side of the unholy, can as a result of sins that are done down here, influence negative energy into the Shekhinah and bring about these pollution and these darknesses in the mind, which again, this influences very much trends of thinking down here in this physical world. So it's a fascinating, frightening idea. Now it's interesting, he says over there that that the snake has no access to the Shekhinah, but the snake is able to connect himself. The male klipa, the masculine klipa, the male klipa, the male unholy shell, extraneous forces, connects to the holy male, because they're one opposite the other, so they have some kind of a connection. And when there is a union between the holy masculine light with the Shekhinah, when we're not putting up the protection the way it's supposed to, it's possible for the other side to also have relations. I'm just thinking right now, and this could be the reason why there are so many laws of modesty, and it's so important that when a husband and a wife are intimate, that there's dark, and it's covered, and they're covered, and so on and so forth. Because the first time I've ever made this association, it's possible that there will be some dark demonic forces that we won't see, and the woman will have no clue, and no one will ever know. That's because you have to realize, as a result of a physical intimacy, there is also a spiritual transmission from soul to soul. So even though, they're in their bedroom and they don't see anybody else over there, but spiritually the woman can be harmed if there's a lack of tznius. Again, he does not say this, but it makes sense based on what I'm seeing, that it makes sense that something like that should occur. But he says that that's what it is. When the holy man, there is some kind of a joining along from the other side, and that's why there needs to be protection. This is the idea of Esav rape, and that's what we mean when we say that Esav raped a girl that day. That's what it means. The girl that we're talking about is not just a woman. Maybe he raped the girl down here, the physical raping of a girl, but it represented this spiritual effects. Again, Yaakov and Esav are battling over the world, and the forces of holy and the forces of unholy are in a powerful clash. And Esav is trying to affect this Naira Hamarasa, this girl who's engaged already, because the world is engaged to God, and instead wants to tear the world away from Hashem. But here's the idea. The verse says, don't do anything to the girl, but the man should be put to death. What does that mean? Really realize something. That the Shekhinah is really, it says with the Jewish woman in Egypt, Hashem says about the Jewish people, you are a closed garden. You're fenced off. And we know that when the Jewish people were in Egypt, the Egyptians did not have any claim or no power over their wives. An unbelievable thing usually in those cultures, especially during a time of slavery, when Jewish women were beautiful, the fact that the Egyptians could not, there's only one story of one rape. Other than that, it never happened. Because this woman was a lack of modesty. That's what it says. But besides this, all the Jewish women were clean. It was an unbelievable protection that God protected the Jewish women. So the verse says in Shir HaShirim, God refers to the Jewish people as a closed garden. And the idea is they're closed, they're locked. So the question is, what happens if we sin? And spiritually that means that a Jewish people do not accept the rape of a foreigner. They resist the rape. But what's with sin? What's the time when, God forbid, that we do, God forbid, I have a situation we just spoke about, that the snake has relations with Chava, what spiritual meanings of this. So the deeper explanation to this is that it says that from the Zohar, that the klipa can only affect the most external layer of the Shekhinah, but cannot get into the inner realm of the Shekhinah. Which means the pollution is very, very, very external, very exterior. And what's the point of it? And why does God allow even that to happen? God allows that to happen because ultimately, as he has relations with her, he imparts his energy into her, and then it's like the bee that stings, and once it stings, it dies. So when Esav, the man of the unholy, violates Kedusha, they're ultimately losing their energy, they're losing their life. It's the idea that the entire realm of Esav is completely transformed, which means the energy is elevated to Kedusha, and Esav collapses and dies. And that's the meaning, what it says in Devarim, when it says over there that don't do anything to the girl, which means to the Shekhinah, which translates later into all the Jewish souls, and all the impact that happens from outside, external, God forbid, of this rape, it's not affecting in any deeper place. And that too has a purpose, because to extract the energy from the unholy and to elevate it into holiness. Similar to the idea, I just want to share an interesting thing. It says that when in Darizal, it says that when Hamor, or Shechem, the son of Hamor, raped Dinah, the son of Jacob, it says that the opposite, not that he polluted her, but that she had within herself certain impurities. It says that she was a reincarnation of Avram Avinu's mother, Amaslai, whose husband, Terach, raped her while she was during her menstruation, during her time of Nida. And Avram was born from that. It's amazing how that came about, because God can only take out a holy soul from an extreme dark place. So that's what it says. But they had to come into incarnation, and she was incarnated in Dinah. And in order to have that impurity taken out of her, when he raped her, we think that she became polluted. The opposite, the Holy Ari says, he actually pulled out all the zohama, all the filth that was in her from before. He extracted it from her because it was like a magnet, and now she was purified. So, when we look at things, we don't see the whole picture. We think that she was polluted. The opposite, he cleansed her. I mean, obviously you can't understand this in a regular story. We wouldn't suggest that, God forbid, to tell anybody that was raped that they're being cleansed. But we don't know God's higher things. That's what I'm saying. We have no clue. We don't know. So, but in that story particularly, that's the way it was. In this case, it's the opposite. We want to extract some sparks from Esav, and that's why it requires this whole temporary darkness of vulnerability of the holy woman of the Shekhinah to the forces of Esav, to the snake, and so on and so forth. But all of this is just things of the past. It's over now. We're living already in the time of Moshiach. The end is here already. It's time already for Esav to completely collapse, meaning the unholy realm of Esav, and the spark of Esav, which is the true inner identity of Esav, to be uplifted and being brought along towards the redemption. May we see that happen now, and now.